Good afternoon, Key Biscayne, Andrea Aga, Village Manager. Thank you for being here with us this evening for the first of a series of town hall discussions where our goal is to really help the community understand some of the facts and figures behind the resilience program, some of the projects we're pursuing, and be able to answer any questions and folks have about the GeoBond process and some alternatives that are available to the council and to the community. So with us today, I'd like to first acknowledge Mayor Davey and Councilmember McCormick. Thank you both for being here with us. I'm going to introduce the team and then I'm going to ask Mayor Davey to give an opening remark. And so also with us, we have Benjamin Nussbaum, our Chief Financial Officer. We have Jeff DiCarlo from the Weisserota Law Firm, who is bond counsel to the village. We have Jake Osman, who's our Public Works and EZP Director. And then we have Roland Samimi, who's our Chief Resilience and Sustainability Officer. And we have Gabby Rodriguez, who's our Communications Officer. So the team has been working hard to really help the community understand what is before the village. And tonight we have a brief presentation that we will be giving. We're going to, after the opening remarks from many of the members of council who are with us this evening, I'm going to ask that we allow staff to get through the presentation and then we will take any questions and answers toward the end of the session. We do have a hard 1 hour stop. So if any questions we don't get to this evening, we will happily take emails or you can reach out to us and we'll be sure to provide answers either in a subsequent town hall, on our website, or perhaps both. So Mayor Davey, would you like to say an opening remark?
Thank you, Madam Manager. I want to thank everybody for putting this together. As I said before, facts matter. People need to be informed. People need to inform themselves and come to their own conclusions as to, why we're doing this and whether or not it's a worthwhile proposition. So I appreciate everybody putting this together. I think this should go up on the website and we should be distributing it across town, make sure everybody's gotten a chance to see this and all of the other town halls that are scheduled because it's important. People need to be informed. We have an important election coming up on November 3rd and I hope we have a high turnout and a high participation rate among our residents. So thank you for everything and good luck.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember McCormick, would you like to say anything?
I don't need to say anything other than thanks to staff for putting this together and for residents for coming out to try to learn a little more about it. And hopefully as these meetings go forward, we'll get more and more people to get the information. So thank you and looking forward to the presentation.
Great, thank you. If there are any other elected officials, thank you for being here. And if you'd like to speak, that's it. Okay, great. So Pete, if you would kindly let our audience know how they can participate this evening, if you could remind folks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you do wish to address the council and staff with any questions, please just dial 305-365-7569 and then follow the prompts and input the meeting ID number, which is 231-627-8415.
Great.
And then press *9 to raise your hand in our system, and you will be called on by the last 3 digits of your phone number.
Great, thank you.
Andrea, can we just do a little check here because it seems like maybe folks can't see what's up on the screen being shared.
I heard that, and I heard that it is now fixed.
Oh, okay. So at this point, I'm assuming that people can see the title slide.
Great. So let's get started. If you want to click to the next slide. So we have a few different presenters today. So we're working off one PowerPoint in our virtual meeting here. So
Andrea, I'm still getting, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm still getting some text saying that it is not viewable.
Dr. Samimi, that is because what they're seeing now is just the slide.
Okay.
We have received requests to take the slideshow down until we actually start it.
We are starting now.
Okay.
Yeah, the slideshow seems to be up on channel 77.
All right,
Okay.
so first slide.
Let me just, okay.
There we go. So the village obviously is facing some pretty serious threats as we move forward. And one of the objectives we have this evening and throughout the months to come and years to come is to really help the community understand what resilience means for the village. In particular, the flooding. We know we have sunny day flooding, and during storm events, we have even more significant flooding. So part of the objectives of the funding source that is being discussed at the council level would be to address mitigation of flooding, also hardening of our infrastructure and our shoreline protection. Those are the three main pillars or programs within the resilience program, the main threats that are really facing the village. In addition to the underground infrastructure, the stormwater management plan, which is has a different funding mechanism and is only going to be discussed tonight to the extent that it drives the sequencing of some of the projects that we're going to be exploring. So if you could go to the next slide, we want folks to understand what the ballot language is. So this is something that the village council passed by a resolution. So there will be a question on the ballot in November, and it will read as follows. Shall the village issue general obligation bonds not exceeding 100 million in one or more series, maturing not later than 30 years from their issuance dates, bearing interest rates not exceeding the maximum rate allowed by law, payable from ad valorem taxes levied by the village, to mitigate effects of sea level rise and flooding, protect village beaches and shoreline, and harden infrastructure to the effects of hurricanes. Shall the above described proposal be adopted? And then you either will check off for bonds or against bonds. So I wanted to point out a few things about the ballot and the language. So the village is limited by the number of characters. So you can see that, you know, you're not getting the full story here. So a couple points I wanted to point out. First of all, it's a not to exceed amount, and there are bonds plural. So there are restrictions that we'll get into later about how the funding is made available to the village and how the funding can be drawn down. And it is highly correlated to the way that we sequence the projects, the level of preparation that the projects need, as well as several checks and balances and decisions that need to be made by the council as we move through the process. So multiple drawdowns, not to exceed 100 million. One point that we'll also get into in a little bit later is the timing of it. The improvements we're talking about are really going to last for generations. And so looking at a longer term financing mechanism that aligns with a lot more likely aligns with the length of the useful life of the projects is also something that is being considered here. Tonight, what we're going to get into is high level kind of what the process is that we're facing. And then most of our presentation, which is brief, no more than 20 or 30 minutes, is going to be focused on the actual projects and helping people understand, regardless of funding mechanism, these are real projects, they are real threats that we need to address, and we look forward to the opportunity to be able to explain those. So if you could roll and go to the next slide, please. So public participation is essential. The village is going to be hosting a series of 4 town hall meetings, starting with this evening. Our second meeting is going to be on August 20th, then September 3rd and September 17th. All of the meetings will be held virtually. So hopefully we'll all get in the rhythm of learning how to access these meetings and participate as time goes on. I know that was a challenge we've had in the past, so hopefully we'll shore that up. If you would go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about the checks and balances and what the GO bond process is. So basically, we've established a series of projects within each of the programs that we're going to go over tonight that are really based on the master plans and the vulnerability assessments that the village has already done. So once we have those conceptual products completed, which for the most part they are, we engage engineers who would begin to do the more detailed cost estimates, scheduling of the projects. We would be going out to bid based on the prioritization of projects by council and the approval of said projects by council. So once we've established the sequence of the projects, which projects are going to be prioritized, we would use the village's financial advisor, who was awarded a contract recently and who actually, I think, onboarded this week with us. So they're not with us yet, but over the next few weeks, they've been participating in the process with us, and they'll quickly get up to speed about the specifics of our programs and what we're looking for. So once the projects are agreed upon by council, the engineering is completed, we would go to market to be able to get the bonds in place. The approval process by the council would require an ordinance and supplemental resolutions to basically set the parameters under which the village can administer the programs, and depending on the series and the drawdown and the sequencing that the council feels comfortable with, the staff and the financial advisors and the engineers that we're working with can build out the specific draws on the series so that we most effectively utilize your money and we most effectively minimize the disruption to your neighborhoods. If you could go to the next slide. So the bonds would be issued either to pay upfront, or in this instance, since the village has already started expending funds, as long as before I was even on board, with regard to hardening of infrastructure, the master planning process began years ago, in fact. And when I started, the village, adopted at that point the master plan for the undergrounding. So we've been engaging with engineers, and we have stormwater master plan that also was predates me and has been updated. So a lot of these expenses that we're incurring now would be eligible for reimbursement under the GEO bond with a limited look back period. So that's something that we can talk about later, but we're not going to get too much into the weeds of that. One other thing that I wanted to point out, and this decision has yet to be made by council, but it will be a decision that will be presented to them, and it's something I believe in, and I think is in the best interest of the community to have some sort of oversight committee. So once the FA is in place and once things are moving and projects are rolling out, I think it is in the village's best interest to have another set of eyes and ears and oversight that is separate from the elected body that may turn over every 2 to 4 years, and also to help oversee what staff is doing so that the community feels peace of mind that every dollar is being accounted for and spent wisely and strategically. So next slide. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Benjamin Nussbaum, our CFO. Basically, we're going to go through 3 or 4 frequently asked questions that we've been getting most recently. We're going to talk about a potential series of issuance, and then the main event, we'll turn it over to Dr. Samimi and Jay Gossaman, our engineer, who will go into the specific projects, how they overlay, and how they will impact you. So with that, I will turn it over to Benjamin.
Good evening. So I'll go over some of the frequently asked questions. I do want to reiterate for those who are having trouble watching at home that these questions and answers are also available on the village's website, VKB.
So I'm sorry, Benjamin, you're coming in and out with your connection. And you may actually be frozen. So Benjamin, why don't you log out and log back in? to reset your system there, because I think you're frozen. So while Benjamin logs out and logs back in, I'll keep us moving. So what prompted the village to consider the need for funding resilience projects now? I think that the key here is the timing of what is going on. The reality is we know that the sea level rise projections are indicating that over the next 20-year planning horizon, we expect the sea levels to rise anywhere between 10 and 17 inches. 20 years seems like a long time out, but the storm that we had most recently, and even a few weeks back, we had a flooding event where we saw our own vehicles with wakeboarders behind them going through the streets. So the threat is real. It is here now, and it is important, especially when we're looking at our beach, which is one of our most precious assets. It really is important that folks understand the amount of time and energy that it takes into preparing and planning and permitting for these major environmentally sensitive infrastructure improvements like the dunes and the beaches and the mitigation of the seagrass that is also involved. So although it might feel, decades away, it's something that has been going on for decades. It's probably taken on most traction within the last 7 to 12 years. And it's something the village has been planning on, not just on the government level, but also with our community partners, including the foundation in particular has done a lot of work over the years, including the vulnerability assessment to help inform some of the decisions that are now coming before council. Next slide, please. So what is a GO bond, or a general obligation bond? So it's a funding mechanism that is financially backed by the assessment of ad valorem taxes. So your ad valorem taxes are your property taxes that you pay on your home. A GO bond must be approved by the voters before proceeding with implementation. So that's what a general obligation bond is. And then why are we considering a general obligation bond? So one is that it is a steady financing mechanism. So when we move into projects that are going to span multiple years and have useful lives of decades and decades and decades, it's important to me to know that there is a committed, financially sound mechanism that will ensure the completion of these projects. It also will allow for us to, it's a stable funding source that will allow for a really unified, logically sequenced manner that yields cost-effective infrastructure upgrades without duplication of efforts or a broken piecemeal approach. So one thing that that we're sensitive to and that's important to us is that we want to minimize the disruption to the neighborhoods. So you'll see in a few minutes how the projects overlay and how we are doing everything we can to ensure we don't dig up your street and then, a few years later dig it up again. We really want to be, effective and strategic in our delivery of these projects. The final thought I had on this is, really by pledging the full faith and credit, which is the taxing power of the village, it generally allows for longer term financing than some of the other mechanisms at a lower cost as compared to other mechanisms of funding. So on the next slide, we also, we want to share with you guys the facts. So that's why the GOB is being considered. And I think Benjamin is back with us. Hopefully his sound is improved. If you could, Benjamin, I carried us for a bit. If you want to jump in here and talk about some of the other financing mechanisms, just so that folks are informed about what the decisions are before them.
Sure. So let me reiterate that GO bond is just one financing mechanism. There's other mechanisms which include special assessment, covenant to budget, and appropriate legally available non-ad valorem.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but I think we're having issues with the connectivity. Maybe you can call in, Benjamin, and maybe we won't be able to see you, but we could hear you better.
Benjamin, maybe click your video and try just audio.
So you're muted now, but the video's off, which would save some of the bandwidth. Is he able to unmute himself, Pete?
He is a co-host. He should be able to.
Can you try to give him a hand to unmute himself just in case?
I've already sent them a few of those. Please unmute yourselves. Messages. And whoop, it dropped them.
Yeah, so I think he's probably gonna reset himself here. So why don't we let's go ahead to your part and let's talk a little bit more about the projects, and then we'll jump back to the financing mechanisms when we work that out.
Sure. Okay. So building a bit on what Andrea has already shared and explained, and with the understanding that there are a variety of funding mechanisms to undertake large infrastructure projects, and depending on the economic or financial conditions of the time, council may choose to use one funding mechanism over another. Keeping all of that in mind, should it be decided that going with a issuance of a GEO bond is the most favorable way to go at the time, we've sort of broken this whole program up into multiple series. So each element of the GEO bond has a program, and within that, such as mitigating the effects of sea level rise or protecting the village's beaches and shoreline or hardening infrastructure. Within each of those are a series of projects taking into consideration mitigating the effects of sea level rise. There's 3 phases of projects that are oriented around roadway improvements utilizing a complete streets approach. And those are breaking up the village of Key Biscayne into 3 different zones, south, central, and north. And over the course of the next, say, 10, 12 years, all of those street improvements or roadway improvements are going to be made in a coordinated manner relative to stormwater management system upgrades and hardening infrastructure. So each program has a total cost that if paid for essentially straight through the GOB program would have a $40 million total cost for mitigating effects of sea level rise, $23.3 million cost for protecting villages, beaches and shorelines, and a $35.2 million cost for hardening of infrastructure. Now, being that we can't do all these projects at the same time, and being that for each bond that is issued, each bond series that is issued has to be spent over the course of 3 years, and given that we don't want to disturb the entire community trying to get everything done simultaneously, what we've done is broken things up into 4 different series. And what you'll notice is that series 1 would be essentially the first bite at the apple, so to speak. And that series 1 is essentially based on the stormwater system upgrades that we know are going to be coming very soon, because AECOM, which is the engineer that has been contracted to guide us through the stormwater system upgrade, which will be paid for through stormwater fees outside of the GEO bond mechanism, that system upgrade is already focused on the K8 area, and it's focused on the K8 area because the vulnerability assessment that was done in 2017 indicates that that's a very likely area for more extreme flooding in the next 10, 15 years. And also people have already observed dramatic flooding there, and it's a nuisance to the point that it has to be dealt with. So with the understanding that that is happening, the thought was then linking roadway improvements and undergrounding with the stormwater upgrades that are going to be done in that K8 area. So what you end up seeing is in series 1, you have $9 million that is going towards hardening infrastructure, phase one, in sort of the southern portion of the community. That's a $9 million undertaking. You have $13 million roadway improvement project that is sequenced with the undergrounding and the stormwater system upgrades. And then you have a 2023 beach nourishment and breakwater analysis that's undertaken at a cost of around $3 million. Those three combined efforts basically add up to $25 million. And that $25 million will be expended over the course of 3 years, which is the limitation that is faced before a second series is ever even considered. And the work is intended to be completed in that 3-year period, at which point then economic situation is reevaluated, and but in advance of doing sort of the next series of projects, and village council then has to make a determination if, to advance to the next second series of projects, it's preferential to utilize the GEO bond again, or whether it's preferential to use some other funding mechanism because maybe economic conditions are such that it is preferable to use some other mechanism. Ultimately, what we have here sketched out is 4 series, the first series being 25 million, the next series being 30 million, the third series being 3.9 million, and the last series being 12 million. And each one of those series has projects that are oriented around roadway improvements, hardening of infrastructure, all sort of linked up to the upgrades that are being done to the stormwater system. And since the stormwater system improvements tend to be the deeper projects, literally deeper in the ground, that sort of drives everything. And Jake, I'm going to pass it on to Jake for him to show you sort of an example of the sequencing for the first series of $25 million.
Thank you, Roland. So you kind of covered everything, but I'll just summarize. First, I'd like to point out that the stormwater improvement project will be the driver on setting the schedule and sequence of the projects. First, stormwater project will focus on K8 Center and Central West Key Biscayne due to its geographic features.
If you could, thank you.
Which makes it most vulnerable to flooding because it's very low lying. And by the nature of it, stormwater project will be done first because it's the first in the ground, and then utility undergrounding. And then the icing on the cake will be the complete streets, which will cap the project, and the disturbance in the neighborhood will be over. We have utility undergrounding master plan. It's been done, and as you could see on the right-hand side of the screen, there are 4 phases. At that time, our engineers thought that starting from south, being phase 1, and going north will be the best route to go. And that may change. We may have, again, the central phase 2 and phase 1 change sequence. But again, like I said, it's going to be driven by the stormwater project. And on the left side of the map actually shows the vulnerability. As you could see, I don't know if people can zoom in, but you see the streets and blocks, and you see the blue waterways, almost looks like Venice. So that's basically what's going to happen if you don't take an action. We'll have stormwater flooding and becoming a river in every block. And one other thing that I want to mention is it's the dangers of short-term thinking. And I'll give you an example. In New York City, if you ever visit, the New York City is served by combined sewers on about 70% of the city. So that means that rainwater and the sanitary water, which goes from our toilets, mixes and becomes a combined sewer and goes to treatment plant. And when it was designed so small at the time that if it rains, you have an overflow. So basically, if you go to New York City and it's raining, you can look at Hudson River or East River, you will see sanitary overflow. So I'd suggest you don't swim. And then this wasn't too long ago. New York City's sewer is about like 80 to 90 years old. So 8 years ago, they thought that it was okay to discharge the sanitary sewage into the river because they thought it was going to take it away to the ocean. It'll be fine. But in 80 short years, we figured out that it was actually a bad idea. So now we actually have advantage of the available science, engineering, and technology, and we can forecast and predict what's going to happen 20, 40, 60 years. So we can plan and design for it. So it's very important to take advantage of this and do not set the next generation for failure, because it may become to a point that it can be no longer cured. So that's all I have, and I'll be here and available for questions.
Yeah, Jake, I also just wanted to stress the point that while this vulnerability to flooding depiction is forecasted for the period 2035, we already have significant flooding problems. And it's not in the vulnerability to flooding in 2035 is not going to show up on 2035. It's going to gradually show up more and more and more in advance of 2035. So if we were to say, okay, we're in 2020 now, what's our level of flooding? It's already extreme. By 2025, it's going to be just that much worse. By 2030, it's going to be even worse. And then in 2035, it's going to be kind of like what we envision this picture as showing us. So given the fact that these large infrastructure projects take a fair bit of time to design and implement, the need to start now is absolutely paramount. And then in regards to the shoreline protection phase of this series 1, we are in the process of trying to get integrated into the Army Corps of Engineers 50-year program for beach protection. But that's not a certainty. Maybe we will be, maybe we won't be. This is a scenario where we're taking into consideration the possibility that we might not be, at which point we have to find the financial means to address the shoreline protection that is required in order to maintain the level of service and the quality of life that our community is accustomed to. Now, even if we get engaged into the Army Corps program, that doesn't mean that we're completely off the hook in terms of the financial resources that are required to protect our shoreline. The federal government, should Congress decide to fund the Corps and the beach nourishments for the next 50 years, would be paying 65%. But that still requires that we come up with 35%. And so we'd obviously be looking for funding resources from the state and from whatever other programs are available. But in the event that those funds are not accessible at the time that they're needed, then we have a mechanism to access funds to keep the shoreline protection program moving. And I think it's important to just realize that while it seems like everything is so far down the road, and so therefore there's no need to necessarily, rush to get things going now, the truth is the stormwater management system upgrades for K8 are going to be starting within the year. I mean, AECOM's under contract, they're doing the analysis. Within a year, they're going to have exactly figured out what sort of hard assets need to be where and what what sections of the system need to be enhanced, and then there's going to be a need to pull the trigger on those projects. And therefore, it is incumbent upon us to then make sure that we do the first phase of utility undergrounding in sync with that, at which point then it's absolutely imperative then that we button everything properly up with the roadway improvements so that everything hangs together, and then we can consider moving on to the next phase.
Very well said. Very well said. Thank you.
With that in mind, I want to then pass the baton on to Benjamin, whom I'm assuming is able to communicate with us, and he is going to then share with you what the $25 million bond series 1 bond then translates into in terms of tax impacts.
Sure, hopefully third time's a charm, and quite frankly, this is the question that I receive the most. So as Roland mentioned, there's going to be many series of bonds to pay for these projects. The first one we're estimating to be at $25 million. There have to be certain assumptions in calculating what the burden would be on any tax liability gains. So most of you are probably familiar with the picture on the right. It looks like your annual tax bill that you receive from the property appraiser. And using the interest rate a issued that last week with similar ratings to ourselves, which over a 30-year duration has an annual debt service to the village of $1.2 million. So in this picture, we show what an assessed valued property at $100,000 of taxable value, the burden would be $16 a year. So that's $100. We can multiply the taxable value of your property to calculate what your burden would be. Now, the median homeowner in Key Biscayne has a value of $679,000. So if we multiply the $16 out by that value, it's roughly $105 annually to pay for this first series of improvements. I thought it'd be interesting to note the green section there is Key Biscayne, and of your entire tax bill, the village of Key Biscayne only receives less than 20%, so less than 1/5 of the entire taxes actually stay within Key Biscayne. The majority of them are with the public school board and about 1/3 with Miami-Dade County. It's important also to understand this is showing a homesteaded property. If in understanding the way Miami-Dade property appraisers works, if you have a homesteaded property, the first $25,000 exclusion is just to the school board section, and the additional $25,000 is to all other taxing authorities. The other part I want to mention is on timing. Andrea went over in the beginning of her presentation a lot of the checks and balances in place and having council approve these projects. Adding the dedicated debt service millage to the tax bill is the last step. So if this referendum passes in November, there's no obligation at that time. And most likely, based on our projections, this wouldn't be hitting the tax bill until the 2022 tax roll. And what that means is the taxes wouldn't be due until March of 2023. However, most taxpayers pay it early to receive the discount in November of 2022. So this is really about 2 years away where we actually be feeling the burden of the first series of the bonds.
Okay, so if we could go back to slide 11, Roland, so we can keep that visual up. We're going to, at this time, we'll open it up for questions and answers. We have about 10, 15 minutes left. In the event we don't get through everybody's questions this evening, we will share with you an email address that you can send us any questions that you have, and we will post those answers on our frequently asked questions section of the website so that everybody has access to the same information. I also want to point out that as officials of the government, there is it is incumbent upon us, upon the staff, to not advocate for or against the bonds. So as we go through this process over the next several months, if we seem a little bit dry, if we seem a little bit factual and focused on, facts and not any color surrounding it, please understand that is our obligation, and we are committed as an organization to adhering to that ethics standard and to the laws that are governing this process. So with that, I'm going to ask Pete to remind folks of how they can chime in. And
Andrea, just 1 second. Is this, I don't have a slide count. Is this the slide 11 that you were wanting me to land on?
one backup, actually, the map, I think that is a nice visual that folks can, one slide earlier.
This one, or this one?
The map itself, that one.
Okay.
I think that's a nice placeholder. So Pete, if you would restate the instructions and we'll take it from there.
Yes, Madam Manager. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you watching at home, if you wish to ask any questions of staff, and please dial the phone number at 305-365-7569. And the meeting ID is 231-627-8415. For those of you watching, the phone number and meeting ID are at the bottom of your screen right now. Once you have connected and you wish to speak, just please press *9 on your telephones. Madam Manager, we do have one caller, telephone number ending in 574. Caller, you are live.
Hi, this is Jan Dillo, 350 West Heather Drive, Key Biscayne. I just want to, I actually do not have cable anymore, so I haven't been able to watch this. So I want to make sure that you're going to have this up on the village website with access to YouTube. That would be very, very helpful. Secondly, I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I don't know if you can hear me. But secondly, I want to just make sure that I understand this process, which is that you're going to start at the K through 8 area and do basically everything from undergrounding to raising the streets to, I don't know how you're going to do the beach thing, but those two things and the sewer are all going to happen in that area, and that will be completed before you move on to another area of Key Biscayne. Is that correct?
So the sewer project is not a part of this. The sewer infrastructure is the county's. Everything else you said is correct.
Okay, so there will be areas that will be completed several years before other areas in Key Biscayne. Is that's the way that this phasing will work? That
is correct, yes.
Okay, and also the way that you're describing this, you can't divorce the way that this has been described, you can't divorce different projects. Like you can't say, you know what, we're not going to underground, we're going to let FPL put up a big post and we're going to just do the roads or something like that.
We wouldn't advise breaking up the projects because it would create additional cost and it also would be more disruptive to the community. So our recommendation is if you're going to open up a road, everything that right of way needs, we should be addressing at one point. So we would be addressing the underground infrastructure as well as the finishes on the road, as well as the utilities, which would be the undergrounding portion as well.
Yeah, and I agree with exactly what Andrea said. I would just add that if for some reason the community at large decided, you know what, we don't want to underground anything. Let's just let FPL put up their concrete posts that are hardened to hurricanes and we'll just live with that. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't do the stormwater and the roadway improvements anyway. It just means that if 10 years down the road, all of a sudden you've changed your mind, it means that you have to cut the roads back up to be able to do the utility underground.
And to answer your first question for you, and thank you for that question, and for everybody who's watching, on the village's VKB resilience.org is the website. This presentation is posted there now. It is available already. So if you go to the website, VKB Resilience, in the announcements tab, you can have access to the presentation and all that it is. So thank you, Jen.
So can you just say that one more time? Because I'm on the village website. I just want to make sure I know how to get to it.
So the website is vkbresilience.org. It's not
that one.
vkbresilience.org. And if you go to the announcements tab on the top right, you'll see, you can click on announcements and then you can have access to this presentation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Manager, our next caller is telephone number ending in 530. Caller, you are live now.
Hi, it's me. How you guys doing? First, thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative. As you know, I'm a big supporter of this GEO bond initiative. I think it's very important for people to understand that this voting will not be to agree to borrow $100 million. It'll be to give the village flexibility in order to be able to borrow in the form of general obligation bonds up to $100 million, which could come in 2, 3, 4, or 5 different bonds if that's what the village wanted to do, or maybe just one. So I think it's very important to get that message across because, you know, again, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And people, you know, are being told, no, you're going to borrow $100 million. What are you going to, you don't even know what you're going to do with it. Well, realistically, we really don't know exactly how we're going to take care of these things. We just know that we have to take care of them. And we want to have this opportunity to use general obligation bonds and not just go out and borrow money from a bank, which will be much more expensive, much less time. It'll cost everybody much more money. So, like I said at your last council meeting, this is crucial. This is so important for us to really understand and to. I was on council before. I never had an issue that I felt as strongly for as I do for this issue. And I think that if you don't, you're not understanding it. And I think that a lot of communication, a lot of information is really what this community needs. By the way, the lady that just spoke before me, she mentioned sewers, but I think she meant storm water improvements. Because when you mentioned the county, I'm not sure there was a disconnection there.
No, that's correct.
So,
it is storm water. It's not sewer.
Right. And you know, and the stormwater, I think I know a little bit about it. I dedicated myself during the time that I was a council member to learn as much as I possibly could, and from the people that were available, and right now you can't tell if it rains. You know, the water, if our system is properly maintained, the water goes away really quickly. But that's only it depends on how big the storm is. And the closer that we get to king tides, the water sometimes is outside of the grates, even without it raining. So sea level rise is real. It's happening. We have to address it. You know, it's crucial for the world to know that the village of Key Biscayne is aware of its challenges and it's doing the right thing. So thank you for putting this together. I'll be along with you every time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Manager, we have no other calls at this time, but shall I repeat the phone number and meeting ID?
Sure, we can repeat the phone number, and also I think we have somebody, and I'll also say that if you have any questions for us, you can go ahead and email response@keybiscayne.fl.gov, response@keybiscayne.fl.gov. You could, or you can go right to vkbresilience@keybiscayne.fl.gov for more information. So we'll take one more caller. And if there's anybody else who has any questions, we're thrilled that folks are engaged and that are want to learn more about this, and we want to educate the communities. Like I said, this is the first of a series of town halls, and if we need to do more, we will. So we'll take one more question, and then we encourage you to email us, call us, come by and talk to us, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. So final caller.
It seems like it is Councilmember Dela Cruz again. He may have.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't identify myself. I just said hello. It's me, and you know you guys know who it is, but the rest don't. And so I'm Luis Dela Cruz, 640 Allendale. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, I would like to thank the staff for working on putting this together. And we acknowledge that with COVID and virtual settings, things have been a little tough on the technical side, but we are getting better and we are committed to improving as every meeting goes on. So I'd like to again thank the members of our council who are with us and those who are not able to make it. Most of them have reached out to me and they are with us in spirit. And again, please keep in mind that staff's role is to provide facts, factual information, and that is our goal and that is our commitment to the Village of Key Biscayne. So thank you and have a good night.